All right. Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, Kimberley. How are you?
Hello, good morning.
Oh, fantastic. I'm trying to project here.
Love the energy in the room. All right, how many of you own a Volkswagen?
Show of hands.
Oh, I got a lot of work to do.
Like, I'm looking out there. The lights are bright. Like 93% of the room owns a Volkswagen. That's fantastic. Good stuff, guys. Really good. So we got 7% share to take.
Excellent.
How many of you don't own a car? Or okay, so how many of you? Actually,
The rest of the people who don't have a Volkswagen.
That's exactly it. And we know who lives in New York, exactly. Okay, good stuff. All right, so we just introduced Kimberley. But here's the thing: this conversation is not just a conversation about marketing or about Volkswagen. It's taking an industry that's 100-plus-year-old industry and having to engage very differently in the last 2 years than in the prior 98-ish years. It's amazing how much has changed. Is that fair to say?
I think that's very fair to say.
Okay,
Yeah.
So can you give a little bit of your background, because you've got a lot of credibility in the space, not just with Volkswagen, but some of your history. Can you share a little bit about where you were before Volkswagen, your time in the space?
I was contributing to the 98 years.
That part of it, yeah, exactly.
So I've been in automotive for a little over 20 years. I actually got into automotive because of my environmental background, working on the very first Prius with Toyota way back when I was about 12 years old. And I really stayed in the industry because I'm a big change agent. I like to see things differently. I like to bring learnings from outside of our industry. So I've been somebody for 20+ years now that's been dying for change to happen. Meaning the way we talk about cars, the way we relate to cars, the way we talk about mobility and electrification in a really big way. So I've been in a lot of different brands: Toyota, Lexus, Scion back in the day, Kia, Mitsubishi, now Volkswagen. So I've seen the landscape change, but not nearly as much as I've seen it change in the last 2 years. It has been phenomenally exciting, frustrating, lots of ups and downs, and it's fair to say everything we've done, I think, in the last 98 years has at least been relooked and recast and reimagined in the last 2 years, and you have not seen anything yet. A lot more time.
All right, I like that. I like that intro. So when we think about a brand that's iconic, our MC mentioned the Beetle, and the Volkswagen Beetle is definitely iconic, as is the Volkswagen Bus. So you've got this great history in the brand. We've got all these changes that have happened in the last couple of years. I read an article just a couple of days ago that said that that 82% of cars have now gone for over MSRP, or manufacturer's suggested retail price. I don't remember a time in my life that that's ever happened before. So that's a big change. Is that a first for the auto industry?
It absolutely is. And I just got back from a conference of dealers, National Dealer Association in Vegas just yesterday. That was a huge topic. Again, it's fair to say so much has changed, and I would never, ever have predicted two things that are happening right now. One is a good thing, which is the adoption of EV. But I think a lot of us thought that was going to be probably another 3 to 5 years away in terms of that tipping point. And the other one is pricing, where we've had such a disruption in our supply chain that we can't get enough cars. We just can't. Everything from COVID to now, obviously, the crisis in Ukraine has really, I think, topsy-turvy our supply chain in a way where dealers have customers that are coming in that they can't find enough cars for. And what that's meant is an exact flip of everything we've seen in the last several decades, where we're chasing customers. You've probably seen, now is the time to buy a car. I tell people there's really no bad time to buy a car. I kind of stand corrected on that at this moment, meaning if you're going to buy a car now, chances are you really need one. And dealers, they need to make a profit, and they see the fact that they don't have a lot of cars on the lot, and they're independent business entrepreneurs. So, that's what they're going to look at in terms of that opportunity. It's frustrating for customers. We're trying to manage that carefully. They control pricing, we do not, by law. So it's one of those things where if you can wait to buy a car, you probably should. But again, if you need to, you're not going to have much negotiation power. I mean, that is radically different.
So that's, when we talked the other day, you mentioned there's a major change in terms of the way you're communicating with customers. You've got a couple of different client sets, right? You've got customers and you've got dealers. And for the first, I don't know, however many years you're in the industry, you had one sort of course of action, which was get people to buy. How has that changed over time? What were you focused on for the first few years in the industry, and now what is your focus in terms of marketing, communicating, messaging?
I think it's fair to say that we've been selling cars, talking about cars the same way for a very long time. Websites, brochures, dealers, the whole thing. I think that communication flow is very much about we have something to sell, we have reasons we think people will buy it, and here they are. And a lot of that has been very traditional in terms of how we've laid out what we think is a good matching for what your interests and needs are. And I think, again, now we look at it much more as a customer journey, right? We want to make sure that from the moment we realize I'm going to have a new baby, I'm going to need a car to take road trips in, I'm going to need more utility, or maybe I'm downsizing, quite frankly, like a lot of folks are thinking about now. And we haven't done the best job in terms of figuring out what's the right way to figure out what you're looking for, help you make a good decision. And I've had a lot of conversations with dealers. Don't think about your website as a storefront where you've got your key selling points, right? Now is the time. Here's what I've got in my inventory. Here's what the pricing looks like, etc. Here's how to find me. To what are your needs? And how do I make sure that I make the decision process something where you feel comfortable and confident along the way? And I, by the way, extend that same brief to our media partners, to our agencies, to pretty much everybody. My team knows this because they hear me talk about it all the time. It's a flip of the switch from push, right, to something where I'm kind of pulling out who you are, what you're looking for, and how do I make sure the experience matches up to that. I'll be really honest, we're ways away from that, but I think that's something that's going to be much more helpful to people because buying, we've said it for years, one of the reasons why I love automotive, the product matters, right? You keep it for a long time and you spend a lot of money on it, regardless if you're leasing or you're buying, or even if you're getting a used car, especially now. So my job as a marketer is not to make sure you not only know what I have to offer, but I make you feel like you're really making a good choice. You're making a good decision. I've given you everything you need to make that decision in a confident manner. And then in the end of the day, you feel good when you drive off the lot. You're like, oh, I like this car, not gonna pay for it. Oh, the stress shouldn't start then, right? The stress should get less and less as you continue to own the car. The one thing I'd love to answer is, okay, how do I use this thing? All this technology in this car, how do I pair this? How do I do that? What if something doesn't work? That's what we should be there and to help you with. Not be, how do I make sure I get you a car today and give you a good deal? I'm really bad at being a dealer impersonator. But I think it's something that marketing has radically had to evolve and change with the last couple of years, but I think it's been a long time coming. We're not just here to sell. We're not just here to create demand. We're here to help you make a better decision. Once we do that for a single, I've said this for a long time too, for a single female, right, on her own, that can go through the entire process and feel really good about it, not even needing her parents or friends or somebody to come with her to the dealership, then we've succeeded. We've succeeded. Yeah, okay, wait for that.
So then when you take a look at the way you're engaging with customers and the type of technology you're using to engage with customers or prospective customers, how is that morphed in terms of thinking about, I don't know, first party data or brand safety, all these different areas? How have you looked at that as you're having these longer term conversations, we'll call it, with customers?
I look at tools second, I look at people first. So first off, I think that if we're going to have more of a customer journey conversation approach to what we do, then I want to make sure I can have more of a conversation. So I look for channels, obviously social is a big one, but even through creators and through content generators that have conversations every day with their followers, that's where I really want to play. That's where I want to make sure we show up with the right information. And I'm fine if it doesn't come from us, right? The brand is here to be of help and of use and to provide content and information, but it's really through all of you, it's all through everybody that actually has an experience themselves. So how do I create content that's easily shareable? How do I give you expertise so you can talk about your car if you're an owner, if you're an influencer or a creator, so you don't feel like you have to be a car guy to be able to talk to someone about the right choice for them. We show up a lot in social, but I don't do it directly necessarily through Volkswagen. I like doing it through others who then have that relationship already, because I'm not here to influence you as a brand so much as I am to influence others that you look up to and that you find is a credible source. First party data for us is really about how do I said this a few times differently. I think I said it in a Brand Innovators session a couple of years ago, but it's like, I love all of you, right? I want all of you, all of, 98% don't drive or don't own a Volkswagen. I've got a lot of work to do. But the reality is I can't afford to talk to all of you at the same time. I have a limited budget, like every other marketer out there right now. So I've got to figure out how to focus on the folks that are actually going to be in market for a car, in the next, call it, well, now it's a little bit longer period, but the next, 30, 60, 90 days, in the next year, so that you can start to build that relationship and quite frankly, just put Volkswagen on your shopping list. That's first and foremost. So I think a lot of the first party data that we leverage now is really around how do I make sure I understand what you're looking for, what type of vehicle would you like it in market for, and really importantly, the signals that you're even open to a challenging brand like Volkswagen. If you're not, maybe it's going to be a little more of a longer road to get there, and that's okay too. The hardest thing for me right now is to get Volkswagen on the shopping list for people who have, their top 3, their top 5, Toyota, Honda, Ford, et cetera, et cetera. That's all great, but if you're open to something a bit different, I have to use data to be able to inform our team, right? Who's going to be more open-minded? Who's going to consider a German vehicle? Who's going to be open to EV, for example? So we're looking at poll data and a variety of other sources to try to help make that decision.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing you talk about, 6 months or a year. Has that length of buying cycle, has that drastically changed? And not just because of supply chain, but just in general, like you said, challenge your brand, trying to get people who are going to be interested in German brands and a number of other things. So what was that car shopping journey like 10 years ago, and how has that changed in terms of duration now?
It's anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months. Now I think it's from 6 weeks to a year or more. It can take people to make that decision. And really what I tell people is, as soon as you start to think about something, just start doing a little bit of homework, take your time, talk to people who own that brand, or talk to people who know it. It's because it takes such a long time. You don't spend that kind of time, looking at websites, looking at tons and tons of data about spec and features and things like that all the time. Just think about what you love about driving now. And if you know who you are and what you like, that's a huge part of it, believe it or not, right? We don't all like to go 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds. Yeah, which I grab an ID4, I grab an EV. A lot of people think, oh, EV, it's like a golf cart, it's going to be slow. The reality is, it's not. It's 8.2 seconds. It might sound a little slow for some folks in the room, but with no chip points, that low end torque in that car, you just take off like a lightning rod, and it is freaking awesome. It's quiet, right? And I don't get to have to go to a gas station any longer. So know who you are, know what you like, and make sure you keep that in mind as you go through the process, right? And find somebody who can be a little bit of an advocate or a friend along the way if they recently bought a car, which is a big help. So, and I'm going to be fighting with my side of the business in terms of dealers and getting them to understand what that really looks like in terms of what you all need, not, like I said before, what we want to sell to you, which is 0 to 60 for towing, all those things. Important. But do you like road trips? Do you not like road trips? Those kind of things.
You have the low end torque, so yeah. So one thing, let me just go back to my notes. Okay, so Kimberley said, if you mention Ukraine, I'll kill you. So, okay, so the prices in Ukraine right now.
I did not. No, I didn't.
Did not.
I don't think I have some Sarah from my team. Is Sarah, have I ever said I'll kill anyone?
No, not at all.
Not being recorded.
Not at all. So, but I do have a couple questions about that, and for 2 reasons. One, gas prices have gone up in the last week, like what, 20, 30%. And 2, managing the type of content that you have messaged in front of. So let's start with the content. It's so important to be able to support the news and to make sure that we do fund news sites with good, legitimate news. So what are you doing to make sure that you're not defunding good news, but also avoiding messaging that you don't want your brand next to?
It's a tough one, and we talked about this before, that when the conflict in Ukraine started, Germany, our parent company in Germany, was very thoughtful in terms of what do we need to message out, what do we need to say about our operations, what do we want to show up next to, and what do we not. And so we've taken a lot of guidance from them in terms of things like keywords to avoid, content to avoid. News has come up many times. And we've had to honestly pare back a bit because I think we're in that mode where it's kind of counterintuitive maybe, but like I said before, we're not having to sell so much right now. There's so much demand out there. It's a little easier right now for me to be completely transparent and pull back on my messaging and be more thoughtful about how do I make sure my website content has the right information, that in social we have more in-market information. We really dialed back our new market consideration kind of work, meaning people that we thought were a bit further out, kind of pared that back the people that we were remarketing, retargeting to, we kept that up, especially in our more of our local dealer advertising communication. Because if people have already signaled they're interested, then we felt like that was good to proceed and safe to proceed. We pulled back a lot in terms of anything around news that would have been seen as controversial. And business critical is really where we've focused right now. We've slowly started to bring that back up, but I think we've relooked at all of our messaging and said what seems to be appropriate, what seems to be okay right now to say, and be really, really sensitive to the topic. And it's changing, as you all know, every day. I'm listening to the BBC and NPR every morning, and I'm very mindful as I approve our social content that things that might have been okay to say 2 months ago, a month ago even, that are celebratory, like we've got our ID Buzz here, that we're conscientious about what's coming up in the future. We're not necessarily talking about today. Because I don't want to be seen as a brand that's kind of capitalizing on a moment in time that just doesn't feel right. And that's a judgment call. It really is. Like, yes, I've got my keywords. Yes, I'm trying to stay away from certain outlets. It's not about pulling back from the news, but it's about making sure I'm really sensitive to the moment, and that's going to change day by day. So we're literally looking at our content and social on a day by day basis.
First, I want to thank you and commend you for being open to talk about that. I think it's that kind of guidance for other marketers, because I think a lot of companies struggle with that. Where is that fine line? The fact that you're so willing, she did not threaten me, by the way, just to be super clear on that. But you did also mention this, with gas prices right now, it's kind of opening up additional conversations around electric vehicles. So can you talk a little bit about that in terms of the innovation Volkswagen's doing around electric vehicles and the different sort of buyer personas? I don't drive an electric vehicle. You said you've been driving one for some time. I don't drive. Yes, I have an appointment this afternoon to start to drive an electric vehicle. But can you talk about the different buyer personas in terms of people who have bought, or how you're thinking about different consumers that way?
Yeah, we've been pretty open about this too. We've looked at this marketplace for the last year-ish or so and said there's really 3 groups. First and foremost, EV established. So people that have already had an EV in their household, most likely they've had a Tesla, they've had something else. So they're already there. They may be just looking for something different or new. They want more of an SUV body style. They just want a new brand to have in their household fleet, etc. But you don't have to convince them that's the right thing to do. Then there's that EV prime group that we look at as they're ready, right? They're going, okay, EV, I like the idea of it, but I just haven't found something to meet my needs yet. And that's also fairly straightforward. And the last group, I think, is really EV open. And that is the group that you said, well, maybe in the next year or 2 or 3. So how do we message to them in a way that gets them more comfortable with infrastructure, right? What's it like to charge your car? How far can you go? Those kinds of things. What's it like in your daily drive? What makes it different? It does not feel like a golf cart. It feels like a really fast food, but the car is really quiet. And so it's just getting people used to what that's like. And that takes time. You don't want to rush that decision. And quite frankly, now, because of the market dynamics I mentioned earlier, you may not get one. We are sold out of ID4s, or I should say reservations for ID4s for many, many months to come. So that means that we really can't offer you something maybe immediately like we want to. It doesn't mean you should raise your hand, go to a dealer and say, put me on the list today, you should. But that takes longer time, so we get that. So we try to treat those audiences in a very different way with information, with data, with that content I mentioned before. So I've tried to get a lot of diverse folks behind the wheel of an EV. Right, a parent, a young mom of 2, a family of 5. She couldn't put them all in there, by the way, because they won't all fit. But road tripping, we've had vegan chefs get in the wheel of the car, behind the wheel of the car, just to kind of do a little farm to table thing. Surfers have taken the car out because they love the Volkswagen history. So we've had a lot of really interesting people, I think, that get behind the wheel of an EV, and many of them for the very first time. So that's kind of reaching that prime and that EV open segment as well. So it's really getting people comfortable and confident. I've been in the industry for a super, super long time. I am so excited for this moment where we can talk about EV and people are like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And I kind of think I might be open-minded to one. I didn't think that was going to happen this quickly. No way would I have did that. I am thrilled for it because I think it's the right thing for not only all of you as consumers in terms of your daily drive, and I promise you will get used to one and you will love one when you're ready for a lot of good reasons. One, you can pass the gas station and you don't have to spend $5+ now on a gallon of gas. But I think it's right from a carbon offset and a carbon climate change perspective. It's time, guys. We all know that we have to do something. We can't wait till 10 years from now to fix that. So I encourage people now, if you're ready, start thinking about it, get behind the wheel of one in some way, shape, or form if you can. Figure out charging infrastructure and go from there, because that tipping point we all thought was coming down the road. With COVID, with I think a lot of other things happening now, it's a lot more awareness around the need for electrification. Gas prices shoot up. One of the first things people are thinking of is, okay, I want to downsize, I want to spend $100 to fill up my car, and I just don't want to rinse anymore.
You know, it's funny you mentioned, though, people have to experience an EV to truly get an understanding. I had a chance to ride a Harley Livewire, so an electric motorcycle, and I'm a Harley rider for life. I've been riding Harleys for 20 years, and I was blown away by how much fun this thing was, how quick, it was really fast. And it was like one of the pre-production models. So I really think that it's like getting behind the wheel or behind the bars to actually take one out. Again, show of hands for car owners here, people who drive cars. Keep your hands up if you've ever driven an EV. Okay, and now keep your hands up if you own an EV. Hybrid?
You're on your way.
It's the gateway EV, apparently. Good work, you'll be there. Okay, so that's great. So a few people have driven them, and I think your call out there is a great call out. You got to have that experience. I definitely was surprised when I got behind the bars for it. I've got a couple more questions, but I wanted to open up to the audience first, if that's okay. Who has some questions for Kimberley here? One and two and three. No apologies. Okay.
Hi. So I was curious, you mentioned your dealerships working with them to help them ensure that messaging is clear. I'm curious, I'm sure you're doing a lot of digital innovation on your side and figuring out how to connect people to digital dealerships and things like that after COVID. How do you help support your dealers in that way and make sure that innovation trickles through their sides of their platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So around how do we help our dealers in terms of innovating and seeing things in a different way? I think the first one is education. We're spending a lot of time helping them understand what tools they have right now in terms of what we call digital retailing, giving them more of those tools that we offer through, I won't go into details, so we have programs basically that dealers can be part of. We co-op, so we help actually financially support some of that as well. For them to make it really easy. It's a matter of choose 1, 2, or 3, you're good to go, and here's some great tools. The other thing I do is I personally talk a lot about you need to be a consumer. You need to, and you already are, everybody is. But talk about your best retail experience that you've had in the last 30, 60, 90 days, even just flying here, what did that look like? And remember what it looked like 5 or 10 years ago and how easy it is now. Change your flight, change your seat, right? Upgrade, whatever it is you need to do. That's all digitally enabled and you have a much better experience. It doesn't mean that human beings are an important part of the equation, but it means there's a lot more things you can do that are right for you as soon as you need it. And I think we're seeing, labor shortages, we're seeing wait times, supply chain disruptions. I hope that dealers will see that automation, and I mean that in the broadest sense, is a really good thing for them because they're struggling with turnover, they're struggling with having enough people on the floor to meet the demands of consumers. We are struggling with the right amount of inventory. So digital tools can really help them. And I lean into the metaverse too, which we'll talk about another time.
So time for one more.
Thank you, really. Curious about your thoughts on the quietness of the cars.
Quietness of the question?
And quietness of the question. So I was actually in an ID4. My son has a nice blue one, beautiful. I love the braking, walking on it's beautiful. The car sounds like an alien spaceship, so it does have a sound.
I haven't been on an alien spaceship, but you're right.
I felt like that was.
We have what it sounds like, the kind of Star Trek.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, because when you're pulling up in New York City, car pulls up, you can't hear it, you can't see it, it's right in front of you. So what are the thoughts in the industry about adding noise to it? Like the hot rod noise.
That's a tough one. And it came up years ago with Toyota with Prius because it was so quiet, right? And so they built in certain noises to the vehicle. So there was a low hum that people could hear. It's something that we're grappling with now because it's actually a good thing to have more silence in general. But it was particularly an issue for the sound impaired community because crossing the street, those kinds of things, to be able to hear something so that they know when it's coming. I know there's some groups in the industry that are working on that right now because EV is getting so quiet. I love the alien spaceship reference because you're right, it does sound like that, but there is a low world. So you just have to hear a little bit. The more we get out there, the more your hearing will actually tune to that versus now we're trying to find that sound versus every other engine out there, which is louder and, you know, a little bit more disruptive. So more coming in that, but alien spaceship. Who's with us? Go to Mars. This could be with the world the way it is. Yeah.
That is an option. That on our next panel, we'll be talking about Volkswagen mission of ours. Okay, what's that? We have 5 minutes left. We got another question in the audience.
4 minutes.
We have 4 minutes left.
4 minutes left.
3 minutes, 3.5.
Oh, wow.
I'll be quick. Kimberley, thank you. You mentioned poll capacity. If you look at new audiences, how are you expanding what data you look at? I mean, poll has been with us forever. And by the way, for those around, we had to make the Miata more noisy when it came out here, right? But how does finding new audiences drive you to find and look at the data?
Gosh. Well, the EV example is a good one. So we looked at the state and looked at lifestyle kind of information, looked at things that were syndicated data to a certain extent. We also did some first-party research ourselves around EV owners that were more established and more primed to understand like-minded brands that you shop for or shop alongside of media channels. So that was super, super helpful. One thing too that I found that was interesting is that we kind of make assumptions, I think, about our core car buying audience as this sort of general mass of people. And what we were trying to do is even a channel like TikTok or Twitch or some other social types of channels, Instagram, etc. Not so much looking at who's using what, but how. I think that's something that we look at. So we probed about the ethnographies, the one-to-one interviews, asking people how you use what when. And that's also been super helpful. We're not at scale in terms of first-party data and carrying up with that at scale yet. But I think that's something that we're trying to pull in insights for the how you use it and when you use it and how it's going to be helpful for you. I try to use that in terms of programming our media and making sure that we follow quickly with social when we have something running in OTT or connected TV or addressable and that kind of thing. That's my target. That's my sweet spot. So in other words, I can get that signal from you and I can learn from what are you doing on social or search in that moment on that day when I'm running that campaign.
That's great. Kimberley, thank you so much. This has been fantastic to hear about the changes in the last 2 years. So good takeaways here in terms of content matters, in terms of the move to EV. It's not just a responsible move, but it's also the fun thing to do.
And next year, when I ask, how many of you drive a car? How many of you are an EV? How many of you are Volkswagen? Maybe I'll see a few more.
Right on. Thanks so much, Kimberley.